Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you of the brand new Tier 10 German reward heavy tank that will be available tomorrow inside the assembly shop. This is the Kampfpanzer 07 PE, and it is, to all intents and purposes, an all-round heavy ridgeline tank that blurs the line between a medium and a traditional heavy. This vehicle loves nothing more than to shove its bucket in its opponent's faces to protect it from high explosive anti-tank rounds with a formidable, accurate German 120mm that really puts a lot of the other guns on heavy tanks to shame. However, the vehicle does have some significant weak points in certain areas that are going to make you want to tear your hair out. And today, I'm going to let you know exactly what this vehicle is all about, and whether it's worth spending like £150 worth of currency on this thing in the assembly shop tomorrow. Or alternatively, if you're watching this video after the assembly shop's already gone, how to counter this thing on the battlefield. So before we jump into the gameplay, let's see how the Kampfpanzer 07 stacks up with regards to its statistics. And the best tank to compare this vehicle to is not the other German heavies, because this is nothing like the E100, the Maus, or the Panzer 7, but it is very similar to the WZ-111 5A. Now, the Kampfpanzer 07 has a 120mm main armament, so this immediately gives it a significant disadvantage compared to a vehicle like the 5A, which packs a 130. This means that you can't overmatch 40mm plates, or for example, overmatch the top of a BZ-176 turret. That means that the Kampfpanzer suffers in the same way that a vehicle like the T10 E5 or the Super Conqueror does at having to deal with thin armor that is very well angled. The Kampfpanzer also, while it has really good standard rounds with 270mm of APCR pen that also have great shell velocity at 1334, it suffers with its high explosive anti-tank pen compared to vehicles like the T10 E5 or the WZ-111 5A. It has 320mm, which is not awful. For example, vehicles like the VZ55 make like just over 300 work, although that is APCR, but 320 heat is not nearly as good as kind of like the 340 that you'll be packing on the WZ-111 5A. However, the Kampfpanzer does have an ace up its sleeve with regards to its high explosive rounds. With 110mm of penetration and 525 alpha damage, this can really pump up your damage per minute into truly scary levels. The alpha damage of this 120mm is 410, just a little bit better than the Super Conqueror and the T10 E5, which does help it in micro transactions with regards to trading. However, for reasons that I'm going to get on later in this tank review, this 410 alpha damage really stops it from trading effectively in a town environment. Luckily, the amount of ammunition this tank can carry is exceptional at 45 rounds, so you've got more than enough to take a variety of APCR, heat, and also your high explosive. So now let's look at how good the gun handling is. Typically, German tanks have very good gun handling, and the Kampfpanzer is no exception. 1.7 seconds aim time is phenomenal, and when you combine that with pretty good gun dispersion values of 0.15 when moving, 0.15 when turning the hull, and 0.1 when turning the turret, this is a vehicle that can get away without using vertical stabilizers, especially with that awesome aim time reeling in any bloom that you do have. When you combine this with 0.33 accuracy, this tank makes the 130mm on the WZ-111 5A truly feel like it's a heavy tank. The Kampfpanzer gun, this 120, feels more like a medium tank within that regard, and it does have awesome gun handling, and I do feel comfortable dropping vert stabs on this vehicle to invest in a different aspect. To add to that, this vehicle also has 8 degrees of gun depression, and this is all around at least this part of the tank, but watch out as it does have a big old booty at the back that you're only going to have 1 degree of gun depression with. So if you can try and get behind this thing, not only are you likely to pen larger caliber AG rounds, you're also going to prevent it from shooting down on your hull armor. The mobility on this vehicle is absolutely fantastic, a lot like on the WZ-111 5A. 50 forwards with an impressive power to weight ratio, which is even better than the 5A, although it does lose the battle of ground resistances on hard and medium compared to the 5A, and so if you do have a 5A, you'll actually find that it's slightly faster on medium terrain, but slower on soft. However, the vehicle does have worse tank traverse than the 5A with 34 instead of 36 degrees, but its turret traverse is so much better. 36 degrees turret traverse really helps you in being able to not expose the side of this tank's turret, because as we can see, it's really not very good. And so if you've played a 5A, to all intents and purposes, that is how fast the Kampfpanzer 07 is. Now let's take a look at this tank's armor, and it looks pretty good. 160 at the front, 70 at the side, and 60 at the rear. It's not nearly as good side armor as the 5A, which does mean that if you over-angle, you're going to get punished. But the real issue with this vehicle is that it has 190 millimeters of turret armor, which doesn't sound very good. 140 on the side and 70 at the rear. So all in all, just worse than the 5A in pretty much every regard. However, when we look at how this tank's armor actually performs, we can see the mantlet is very thick with about 340 millimeters of effective protection. The turret, however, has only got about 300 at the side, so even like a Kampfpanzer has a reasonable chance, even hitting it this far over from the turret, of being able to go in at like 15%. And if they hit just to the left or to the right with heat, it's like an 80% chance to be able to go through. And if you're not using any of your gun depression, then even the top of the turret is a bit of a weakness against heat, just like the actual weak point is with the Commander's cupola. Against AP, this is going to be an auto ricochet, but this is just something that, unfortunately, when you do get these larger penetration heat rounds hitting you, that it's very frustrating to play this tank. The upper hull, though, is pretty darn good, especially against heat. We can see there's only like a 0.4% chance of going through here. However, high caliber, well, large penetration AP rounds will go through your upper plate, even through this bucket, even with the vehicle not having the best armor piercing, pen 270. However, this gets a lot better when you use your gun depression. Now the whole of the upper hull is pretty much a ricochet, although we can see that you can bypass the bulldozer on the front to skip 20 extra millimeters of space protection, so you can actually go through that, especially when the tank is side scraping. The elephant in the room is that this thing has one of the worst lower plates on any high tier heavy tank. 190, that's pretty much as bad as like a Super Conqueror. It's super easy to pen, and even from an angle like this, your opponents are going to butcher the lower plate of this vehicle. Even tier 8 tanks are going to be able to go through this fairly reliably, or almost every single time. It's definitely one of the worst things about the tank. The next thing to mention is that, holy moly, this is a really big side profile, and with only 70 millimeters over the side, it is super easy to pen this thing when you catch it when it's not directly facing you. I've had a lot of hardship in this vehicle, also with how long it is, trying to side scrape and overexposing yourself from an angle that you didn't expect, especially if your opponents are firing heat. As you can see here, they'll even be able to go through at this kind of an angle with heat rounds, where AP would still be an auto ricochet, purely because the side of the tank is not very thick. Another thing to mention is that when this tank tries to side scrape, that this whole bar on the back, I'll do it from a visual perspective, it'll be easier to see, becomes a weak point. You see where the rear of this tank, I guess with some kind of like engine compartment at the back, goes up? This is an easy target to hit with only 30 millimeters of armor, so everything is pretty much going to overmatch it. All in all, this means that the Kampfpanzer has pretty disappointing armor, and I would say that I had better chances with the 5A, especially against lower tier tanks. We can see that the 5A, even when it's not angling at all, has about 10 or 15% better protection. And when the 5A does use its gun depression, it hides those weak points on top. I think it has really just as good, if not better, turret armor than the Kampfpanzer does. To go along with this mediocre armor on the vehicle, unless you truly are hull down against tanks that don't have great premium pen, 2,200 hit points is very normal. Luckily, its ammo rack health is actually slightly better than the WZ-111 5A. But one of the best things about this tank is that it has 410 meters view range, making this vehicle very capable at spotting, especially when you have the field mods, even if you're not using a premium consumable. And it's a good thing that this vehicle has 410 meters view range, because it has, once again, a really annoying crew loadout. This is the only German heavy tank in the game where it doesn't have a dedicated radio operator, or the loader is being the radio operator. It has situational awareness requirement on your commander, and so if you've got yourself an E100, or you've got yourself a Maus, or you've got yourself a Panzer 7, hoping to be able to put your commander inside this vehicle, you're going to miss out on situational awareness unless you want to waste a skill by putting situational awareness purely for when you're using the Kampfpanzer. Outside of this, the crew is fairly normal. It's got a gunner, it's got a driver, and it's got 2 loaders. So your Maus crew or your E100 crew are going to work very well in here. Crew skill recommendations for this vehicle, gosh, just get brothers in arms, get yourself some repairs, situational awareness, and recon on your commander. This vehicle does do well with something like Deadeye to be able to increase your crit chance. You must have safe stowage, as this thing does get ammo racked a lot, and it is essential to have intuition on both of your loaders so that you can be able to quickly switch between the great 3 types of ammunition that this tank has. Equipment-wise, I personally like durability, vents, and a gun rammer on this tank. And then I have a second build where I drop a durability for a turbo, where I really want to be aggressive and pursue my opponents. And that's because while this tank is relatively fast, it's not incredibly so. And for those games which you think are going to be a complete blowout and you just want to farm as much as you can, the turbo can really help you catch tanks. Other equipment that could be good on this vehicle, if you absolutely want to have legendary gun handling, vert stabs could be a good replacement for the vents. Or some people might even want to use something like gun rammer, turbo, and durability on this vehicle to really harass their opponents. But for me personally, I really liked the performance of this tank with the vents, especially the effect that they have on the view range. And as I've been trying to do with all of my tank reviews today, you're going to see all of the gameplay with just regular equipment. So your performance might even be better if you put bounty or bond equipment on this tank. Field mods wise, this vehicle is pretty darn straightforward. Firstly, you take the ground resistances. Secondly, you take the aiming circle size. Thirdly, you take the view range to pump up the already awesome view range on this tank. Fourthly, I would recommend taking reverse speed on this tank, because I quite often drop the turbo to be able to use the durability device, and you don't really need increased turret traverse speed on this vehicle, as it's already got great turret traverse speed, as we saw it was much better than the 5A. For the final field mod, I personally, as I don't want to use vert stabs and this vehicle doesn't have the best movement dispersion, I'm going to take the lightweight hull, which is the equivalent of having a smooth ride on your driver. But be warned, this will increase the amount of ramming damage that you take and make your crew more vulnerable, so you might want to use a premium med kit. But if you're a player who tries to play as cheaply as possible, you might even want to go the other way, and then you'll be using your med kit less, or just find that a small med kit will be enough. Anyway, I think that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's take this beast out onto the battlefield. So firstly, we're going to be rolling out on Redshire. I'm going to be using the durability device, as you can see, with my increased hit points up to 2,500, and we're in a fairly nice matchup against tier 9 tanks. So aesthetically, I know that this is meant to be a review on the stats, but I have to admit this is a very fetching vehicle. And remember, as you saw in my video yesterday, detailing the assembly shop, and I also showed what the unique style on this vehicle would look like. Unfortunately, Wargaming weren't able to put the unique style on our press accounts, so you're just going to be looking at the plain Kampfpanzer that I guess 50,000 of you will get tomorrow, but not the 25,000 who will be getting those unique styles. And just to clarify, make sure you are logged on at the start time for your server, because I do expect that these styles are going to sell out within a few minutes or so. Alright, so what are we going to do here? Well, the thing is that this tank is so flexible in so many different positions. I could kind of go everywhere and do everything. But I'm so fast into position as well, just like with a 5A. I like to surprise my opponents and see if I can be able to get a bit of a snapshot in. But unfortunately, with the A phase 1 catching me there, you're right, the WZ-111 5A telling me to fall, or so not the WZ-111 5A, the Foch 155 telling me to fall back is definitely the correct solution. Now, as I said with my stats review of this vehicle, it really doesn't do very well when it comes down to trading on corners, because its lower plate sucks, it doesn't have the highest alpha damage, and also you have this weak point at the back corner that your opponents will find. Now let me clarify, for me and also all of the other community contributors who played this tank, we play a vehicle like this without opponents actually figuring out and learning the weak point. So all of the gameplay that you see here, consider that with the amount of opponents that actually discover the weak point oh so quickly, and I'm not saying you have to be like a genius to figure it out, imagine that when the vehicle is actually released, and especially with my review, probably going to end up with, like, I don't know, 50 to 100,000 views. That's going to be 50 to 100,000 people who know exactly where to shoot this tank, and so the armor is probably going to get even less useful than you see in the review from today. So in this kind of a situation, I'm going to be loading high explosive anti-tank rounds, as they just give me an advantage against the top of the AE Phase 1 turret. This is going to just help me to be able to either go through, I hit the top there, so it's not the best thickness, but it does have a good angle. But also, if I just manage to catch the top of the tank, this is where this tank does feel lovely. I mean, this accuracy, this .33 accuracy, you definitely feel like you're more of a sniping tank. When you improve it with the field mod, when you improve it with vents, when you improve it with a premium consumable, this thing's accuracy gets pretty nutty, and I seem to hit the vast majority of my shots. That's definitely one thing that I will say about this tank. For all of the frustration that I had with it with regards to its armor, when you do get it into a position, when you hide its lower plate, oh boy, this gun does feel awesome and reliable. Just not as reliable as my shaky aim there, I guess, against the weak point of the A phase one as it was moving. So I get a little bit overconfident there, decide that now it's time to go and attack my opponent. And unfortunately for me, this wreck isn't too far around the corner, so I'm unable to be able to get shots, and I can't expose myself. The wreck's in the wrong place. I want to get it slightly off the rock here, so it's lower, so that we're going to be able to go hold down on it. So unfortunately, I'm going to kind of like screw this ST1 over just a little bit. I'm not doing it intentionally. I know he's using the wreck, but by me adjusting the wreck position, it's not going to stop him from being able to play. But by pushing the wreck out further around the corner, he does say thank you, and I understand the sarcasm there. I did mess up your shot. But by pushing the wreck out further, now the wreck's going to be lower, so you can see that we can actually go hold down in this position. And as you can see, I'm not blocking the ST1. I'm not taking the inside position and stopping him from playing. I just thought that if I moved the wreck a little bit, both of us could still play. And the ST1 gets the kill. So I guess he was a little bit irritated that I pushed the wreck forwards in front of his line of fire there. But by having two guns in the game rather than one gun in the game, I don't really feel like it was that much of an evil thing that I did. Alright, so now the game is starting to go real bad because they're taking the western flank, the Leopard is advancing, the STB-1 is advancing, but there's not really too much that we can do about that. We've got to just try and dig out dangerous hold-down tanks like the A phase 1. It was a lot easier when I was over towards the edge of this map shooting down on their turrets than it is kind of grinding out around the corner. But as you can see, this tank is no slouch with regards to the armor on the front plate, especially with the bucket actually counting as that 20mm of spaced armor. Word of advice on this tank, when you see them out on the battlefield, and you're going to see a lot of these out on the battlefield on Thursday, that you see the front of the bucket, this isn't actually spaced protection. You see the edge here, I'll pause the video for a second. You see this right here, this kind of grating on the edge of the bucket? That doesn't actually count as spaced protection as you saw with the armor model. Even though it has like struts that come out, it doesn't count as space protection, so you can be able to shoot through that. Now, it's not like there's a giant weak point behind that. There's still about 250mm of effective armor that you're going to have to go through. But if you are firing heat and you see that the Kampfpanzer side scrapes out against you, don't be afraid to shoot through these struts, the headlight, and you might possibly be able to go through it quite easily if you have a decent amount of penetration. Okay, so we're down by 3 tanks. Down by about 5,000 hit points, this game's starting to look a little bit glum. But in a strong position like this, with a good hold-down tank, and with the FV4005 shutting down the T100 LT super hard, this game's starting to not look too bad. Plus, remember, in these kind of situations, we haven't updated the health of the enemy team. So you can see the STB-1 wasn't full health. Unfortunately, the Kampfpanzer is full health though. But luckily, this tank is just perfect for these kind of engagements. 480 meters, they can't see me. Luckily, it looks like the FV405 was spotting for me, however, and this thing just feels like a glorious sniper. So if you're the kind of player who loves medium tanks, not so much heavies, but you want to have something that's kind of more of a heavy medium that behaves a little bit more like an E50M on a ridgeline, then this vehicle might be the one for you. Now, this vehicle, bizarrely enough, has better alpha and also better damage per minute than an E50M, but it's really not that different with regards to its playstyle. It's not going to be that kind of like crazy all-in rammer that the E50M is because of the lack of the 8% ramming damage field mod, and the fact that the tank pretty much weighs the same, if not just a little bit less than the E50M. But it is way better with regards to just how the turret works. Against an E50M, if you've got heat and you hit the front of the turret, it pretty much goes in every single time. On this tank, at least you have to try and hit the cupola on the vehicle, or alternatively get a little bit lucky by shooting up into the mantlet, or just hitting the side of the turret when it's not pointing its gun directly towards you. Okay, so with a kill and now 4,000 damage, we're starting to get more into this game. So my excellent view range spots the STB-1, and I don't know how, but the STB-1 doesn't even spot me. But that's what happens when you have a field mod that increases your view range by 3% on top of 410 meters view range. And if you have situational awareness and recon, you know, I'm packing like 480, maybe even nearly 490 meters view range without using fancy equipment like bounty vents or bond vents, which will push that up even further. Okay, so clearly the T-95 is inside the cap circle here, as we saw an artillery shell come towards the north. I guess the Foch spots the T-95, not me. I unfortunately don't go through the lower plate on the T-95. The Foch, unfortunately, after landing a shell, is dealt a fatal blow by the T-95. But in this kind of situation with 1,300 hit points, I'm just going to go aggressive at this T-95. Just drive straight towards them. Even if they hit me for 750, as long as they don't hammer rack me or set me on fire, I should be okay. And I don't want to sit still for the arty. I guess in retrospect, I could have held back a little bit there and just shot the T-95 in the lower plate. But I do feel like as soon as I get behind this tank, then the game is, to all intents and purposes, it's won. And my ST1 should be able to go and cap or take out the arty. And talk about the ST1, I'm going to give the ST1, hopefully, a thank you. There we go. So what goes around comes around, right? I pushed the wreck out in front of that guy. He missed a shot earlier, but now he manages to pick up a Top Gun. And the ST1 actually says, nice play, bro. And I say, you too. And then hopefully he says thanks. And I say, sorry, I pushed wreck earlier. That's me. I've almost had like an out-of-body experience there. I needed a bit more room. Do I explain a little bit more? I think I might. Wasn't trying to troll you, happy face. Well, we win the battle together, and hopefully that explains to the ST1 what I was doing there, just trying to give us a bit more room. And now it is just a 2 versus 1 in a cleanup with an artillery, as the ST1 says, hee hee. And I was like, uh-oh, arty here, but luckily I had an HE shell loaded. And the artillery in our team gives a GG. ST1 says nice. All happy tankers. And this was just a solid comeback for the Kampfpanzer. It's one of those kinds of tanks where if it sits hull down and your opponents are overconfident and drive towards it, this 120mm is very punishing and very reliable, unlike a lot of other heavy tanks that would end up frustrating me with these sniping engagements. Now we're going to be defending against an assault on Karelia, and I'm electing to use the durability device because Karelia doesn't usually go like this. Okay, sometimes the kills just literally come to you at the start of the battle. I have no idea what that Manticore was doing. But sometimes on Karelia, it just ends up as like a corner fight ends up as a corner fight, which also kind of has a bit of a ridgeline, which I was really looking forward to with this vehicle, especially with the lack of artillery. I should be able to just sit, hold down in the open, and hopefully be able to take out my opponents, right? So I didn't really feel like I needed a turbo. And you can see that we're kind of getting into position as fast as a Leopard is. Not quite as fast as a Leopard, but still not slow by any means. So there we go, there's the problem. You see that I had my turret turned towards the T-57 Heavy on the right, so the T-57 Heavy on the left can fire a gold round right through. And they're still looking for us. I'm moving forwards, backwards, and that one actually just goes straight through my mantlet to the top of the vehicle. Luckily, their third shell ricochets, and now he's looking behind for some hope. Or some help even, and unfortunately it doesn't look like they have it. Luckily the Leopard on my team says they're going to be able to help us out, and we're just going to keep putting round after round into this T-57. I guess I could have fired AP in this situation, but you know, if they're firing heat at me, I'm firing a heat at them. The heat will give me a better chance of going through the T-57 Heavy turret, as it does have some really weird ricochet angles on that east of a turret. And just look how quickly this thing picks up damage. You know, when you've got like nearly 2,600 base damage per minute, when you're packing a gun rammer, when you're packing Fens, Brothers in Arms, Premium Consumable, all of this, it gets even more brutal. And look at that, another one that just went straight through my mantlet there. I'm actually going to show you battle hits after this replay to demonstrate that this thing's turret isn't as good as a lot of people believe it is. So I actually stopped firing heat there, and I wish I didn't, because I now ricochet a shell off the 121B and I leave them alive, where I would have pretty much guaranteed killed them if I put the heat round through the upper plate. But in the first 2.5 minutes of this game, very different to the challenging game that you saw in Redshire, which is why I wanted to start off my tank review with that game. We're just waltzing our way through the enemy team. Come around the corner, easy shot into the lower plate, and look at that, we spot the Foch at 411 meters. Now, maybe they're firing, maybe they weren't, but this is where kind of like that 480, 490 meters view range is just wonderful. And we get 1,850 spotting against the Foch as the FV4005 on my team shuts them down super hard. And wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. That is 7,000 combined in 3 minutes, but it's not over yet because we've got a Leopard forwards. I fire on the move. Going to turn towards the right here to stop them from coming round and maybe putting a couple shots into my lower plate. Or even a Leopard, if it's firing gold, can just go through the upper plate of this tank if you're not using any of your gun depression, so you've got to watch out for that. But what I want to show you with this replay is just how good the damage per minute on this tank is. Like a lot of heavy tanks, you can farm really hard, even with some HE pens here against the Leopard at the latter part of this game. 268 version 4 going forwards, but it doesn't really matter. And that's it. That was just a complete blowout of the enemy team. This tank does very well in these blowout situations. We got nearly 8,000 combined in sub 4 minutes. That is what this vehicle's dream scenario is. Pushing on ridge lines. So next round, we're going to be jumping in on Pearl River. In this game, I elected to use a turbo because I'm looking at the matchup and I just thought that once again, this is going to be a farm fest. Their Kranvang gets forwards, puts in a shot, but luckily the turbo means that I'm not going to be caught out too much in the open. And now knowing that the Kranvang has fired, that means that it's our turn to get forwards. I've got a Chieftain on my team as well towards the right. So those are two very dangerous high DPM hold down tanks. This Kranvang is probably going to regret ever trying to push. The Kranvang realizes it, and quite rightly, they are leaving. The Chieftain finishes off the T10. I'm just going to come around the corner, and luckily the 50 TP ricochets around off me. Not sure if they hit my upper plate there, or just maybe a very lucky bounce off the lower plate. And now, I mean, every time he fires, I can fire like 2 or 3 times, which is scary considering I'm hitting for 410. The ST1 actually finishes off the 50 TP, and again, I am just smelling blood in the water, and we are going to be the apex predator of this battle. Well, I mean, even I am the apex predator. I have to still be careful with linking in my shots. I want to show here, look at this gun handling and accuracy. I just feel so confident coming around the corner and putting a shot in between this guy's 5 seconds intra-clip reload. And just like that, it doesn't matter if you have 750 Alpha Safari Man 007, it's not going to work out. And unfortunately for this 114, he literally has about half the damage per minute that I will have if he's even using a gun rammer. I personally don't use a gun rammer on the 114. And for him, it's just going to be 2 power players in top tier heavy tanks making power plays. This Kranvang's pretty much done everything that they could. They got forwards, they prepared the early mag. They were just a little bit too slow with the Kranvang nerfs, so they couldn't get the full mag in. But I was actually sweating it now, thinking, oh gosh, is this Kranvang now going to dump a full mag on me because I'd be able to miss a shot on the side? Luckily, they're shooting. It looks like the Chieftain, but luckily for the Chieftain, we managed to finish them off. The STRV hits me from the back. We're spotting a little bit of Type 5 heavy. We actually, with this 490 meters view range, spot an STRV 103B at 404 meters. I cannot stress how much vision I got on this tank. I think my average on this vehicle over the sesh that I played it was kind of about like 4,800 combined or something, and a lot of that was spotting because of this fantastic view range, and because this is naturally the kind of tank that wants to pursue its opponents and push the ridge. The Chieftain on our team, Valera, says fun match ... Yeah, unfortunately, this is what happens when you give powerful meta hold down fast aggressive tanks to powerful players. You have a player like me in one of these, and probably a very good player we can see with 2 marks there on the Chieftain, rocking and rolling that tank. What are the enemies really going to do? They've got a Type 5 Heavy who unfortunately looked like, well, I guess they were AFK, so they didn't back up the Kranvang, didn't provide the meat, and this is why kind of like these kind of blowouts happen. So this STRV turns, and I didn't like that very much, so I'm going to throw my weight around and grind into the side of the STRV and finish them off. And yeah, once again, 4 minutes into this game, and we are packing 5,500 combined. I'm going to speed the replay up a little bit here, but again, this tank just farms so well with the turbo. That's why my 2 builds on this tank are going to be Vent, Gun Rammer, pump up the DPM, durability for those kind of maps where I think that the engagement is all in one place, and then using a turbo for a map like this where I feel like I need to chase the damage against my opponents. And again, 6,800 combined in just under 5 minutes. Another super fast, super aggressive game for a very flexible, aggressive German heavy tank, which is about as great as it gets for just pushing on a ridgeline. Although this is nothing different to the kind of gameplay that I'm used to with a WZ-111-5A, which I had the mother of all sessions in, as I managed to 3-mark it just a couple weeks ago. And for all of its weak points, like its lower plate, for all of the weak points, like the one at the back, or the weak points, like the one on top, all the strengths of this vehicle almost more than make up for it. Talking about weak points, I promised to show you where those 2 shells from the T-57 Heavy went in. And yes, just straight through the mantlet. And this was the other shot from the T-57 Heavy. Once again, straight through the mantlet. So be warned, it's not the best. As we can see, just 3 out of 4 gold rounds went through it in that battle on Karelia. So now I want to show you situations where it's not all hunky-dory for the Kampfpanzer 07. I'm firing an HE shell there to get rid of that tree, because that tree actually blocks all vision from anyone who's behind the 705, or if even sneak tanks are in front of you, that tree's actually going to stop us from being able to catch them. So I'm going to show you how good the Kampfpanzer is for side-scraping here, and how awkward the vehicle feels with how long the tank is. So the side-scraping on this vehicle is hit and miss. I showed you all the weak points, and oh gosh. Just to pause for a second, look at where the shot of this from the 705 went in. I can use a free cam to show you exactly where that was. We weren't turning our turret too much away, and the shot just goes right in through the side. And because this tank is so long, the Super Conqueror manages to put a shot in from the left. So it's really awkward in a situation like this, how long this tank is, and that kind of like front-mounted turret is actually really irritating compared to something where the gun is a bit further back on the vehicle, or where you could side-scrape better. Luckily, I'm no longer exposed to the 705A, and the Super Conqueror is getting the right side of this 120mm. But oh dear, my long tank once again proves to be my demise. And we can see the 705A catches that weakness on the back that I showed you with the armor review on this tank. But luckily, being able to have the DPM to deliver 2 for every time they manage to take a shot at us. And oh my gosh, the IS-3 nearly managed to get a shot from the left there into me. Luckily, I guess, in a way, my hit points have been reduced so much that I do have adrenaline rush now. But that is definitely trying to look on the bright side of life. Right. Oh, you just lose 90% of your hit points in the first 3 minutes of the battle so that you can be able to pack some adrenaline rush, right? Yeah, that's not what we're looking for inside World of Tanks. So I just feel like I'm a bit stuck here right now. The 705A just locking me in place, but I also really want to be aggressive and take the fight to the enemy team. I'm going to load an APCR round, because the APCR round will go through the walls. The IS-3 swings and misses against me, and they're just sitting there, and I do not like a little cheeky tier 8 just sitting in front of me. Well, actually, you know what? I like it very much, because it is just delicious, tasty farming. And with a nice, reliable gun, good damage per minute, solid alpha damage, even though my shells all seem to be low rolling. Although the first 3 looks like they high rolled. It looks like we're on a bit of a bad streak with the subsequent rolls, though. I am liking that very much. And it's crazy how quickly this vehicle does pick up damage. We're up to 3,600, which is not a bad game for this tank. It's not a good game. I'd still like, personally, to be averaging at least about 4,500 combined in a vehicle like this, which is what I think the 3-mark requirement will be. But I'm just, yeah, a little bit concerned with just how unreliable this thing feels like in these town engagements. And that's really what I want to highlight with this part of the video. That it doesn't feel like a good side scraper. It doesn't have a good lower plate. And the alpha damage means that it feels very awkward with the trading. And as you're going to see here, even a tier 8 player who probably hasn't even seen one of these tanks before is going to figure out where to shoot the Kampfpanzer. A nice shot there by the IS-3, as I can show you exactly where the shell entered the vehicle, and that will be right at the back. Great kill shot from the IS-3, and we just saw that all the armor on this thing just was horrible for those kind of city trading engagements. So all in all, the Kampfpanzer 07. What do I think about this vehicle? Is it a good tank? Yeah, I think it's pretty darn good. It's a solid tank, and for its gameplay of being aggressive and getting on a ridgeline, it will do the business against its opponents. You saw all of its strengths with that flowing push play style gameplay of the Kampfpanzer, but the amount of weak points on this tank really makes it feel just so awful when it comes down to trading. And this is compounded by the relatively poor alpha damage on this tank. I'd definitely rather play something like a 5A with its better heat pen, which means that maybe I don't have to aim so much, and it's higher alpha damage, which means that I'm going to trade better than playing with this 120mm. However, when it comes down to needing the accuracy and needing that reliable gun for sniping, which it can often easily achieve with its fantastic 410 meters view range, this is a great tank. I don't think this is going to be the new meta, so thumbs up to Wargaming for releasing a balanced reward vehicle for all of the whales for their £150 or $200. I think it's going to end up with an average win rate around about kind of like the T10E5 WZ111 5A performance. My heart really does go out to all of the medium tanks out there that are going to have a new brutal beast to contend with in positions that were previously not contested so much by so many heavies. And with 75,000 of these very likely to be purchased tomorrow and entering the matchmaker, yeah, I think it's going to get a little ugly for all the mediums and the lights. So the final word, is this thing worth $200? No. I feel like the Object, the 780, was special because it was the first assembly shop, and it also is different enough to most of the other tanks. I think the Lion, in my opinion, was totally worth it, especially with Wargaming nerfing the Progetto 65. The Lion is clearly the best tier 10 auto-reloading medium tank. This vehicle just feels as if it doesn't do anything unique, anything novel, and so while it's definitely not a bad tank at all, it's not really worth $200 unless you're a massive World of Tanks collector. And I think you do better to invest your hard-earned resources in other ways. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my full tank review for the Kampfpanzer 07P. Really hope you enjoyed this outrageous breakdown. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know what you think about the tank in the comments down below. Do you think it looks amazing? Do you think it looks awful? And are you going to buy one tomorrow? And once again, if you want to know what currencies I recommend actually spending to be able to get this tank, watch my video from yesterday on the assembly shop. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.